A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you, also our distinguished and esteemed colleagues from across the globe, to participate in the second UNEG official high-level political forum side event. It's being held under the theme Evaluation as a Mechanism for Effective National Follow-up and Review Progress Towards the SDGs. And I wish to thank UNICEF and colleagues from UNICEF for providing the logistical support and also the venue. We very much appreciate it. In July 2016, the first event took place here at the United Nations headquarters, where 22 member states volunteered to present their first national review. This was also the first opportunity for member states to demonstrate a strong commitment to the transformative aspirations outlined in the 2030 Agenda and to set a standard for future national reviews and discuss the challenges encountered and what lay ahead. This year we are here again, and with double the number of countries reporting, 44 countries. So that's progress along that barrier. In 2016, many member states at the high-level political forum showcased their work in setting up structures and coordination mechanisms to implement the 2030 Agenda. The high attendance we have here today indicates the interest in the subject, and we look forward to your robust participation. We're also very grateful to have here today, as it's a UNEG event, our chair, Suzanne Friot, who will moderate the session in a few minutes, and to welcome her as our new chair of the United Nations Evaluation Group, which is our professional association representing 47 evaluation offices across the globe. And we have a key mission to promote independence, credibility, and usefulness of the evaluation function across the system, to also advocate the importance of evaluation for learning, decision-making, and accountability, and to support the evaluation community in the UN system and beyond. We seek to, as a professional association, provide professional expertise to agencies to address matters such as evaluation challenges, evaluability, the ongoing indicator development work, to advise on instruments and methods, and to ensure that when we review and assess that it is credible, to also equip members and their agencies with adequate expertise on the subject so that they can support evaluation at various levels to help with the plans and approaches and to achieve both learning and accountability. And critically, that the approaches are harmonized to mitigate any potential risk of fragmented and non-coherent approaches. The UN is noted for its fragmentation and lack of coherence, and we hope that the 2030 Agenda and the evaluation architecture that supports it will help to reduce these elements. Where UNEG helps is to support decisions around the UN reform process so that we reach out more directly to member states and to UN's senior management to advocate for evaluation as a key element of the UN's work by offering technical and methodological support so that the UN can work better together and that stakeholders who have a vested interest also begin to experience transparency and to really ask the question, is the UN relevant and effective in a context when we have declining global resources for development? A robust evaluation makes this possible as it is credible and helps bring voice to the fore for genuine debate around the transformational initiatives, and there are several of those. Only 2 weeks ago, the UN Secretary General released a report on repositioning the UN development system to deliver on the 2030 Agenda, ensuring a better future for all. And that was a report which I'm sure all of you are going to find important and fascinating. It responds to the mandate of the QCPR. It talks about repositioning the UN system for development. It talks about system-wide mapping of the development system's current functions and capacities. It offers options, critically, for improving accountability and overall coordination of entities of the UN development system and their oversight by member states. And critically, on SDG coverage, the report emphasizes that the UN is not a primary actor and cannot and should not be doing everything everywhere. It suggests others may be better positioned to advance some parts of the 2030 Agenda. and the discussion today should lead to that. Of course, it also highlights that the 2030 agenda was deliberately designed to be comprehensive and integrated. In order to strengthen system-wide governance and oversight of the UN development system, support for the 2030 agenda, the redesigning of ECOSOC's operational activity segment is being proposed for consideration by member states. One of the key functions would include providing system-wide policy guidance and serving as an accountability platform on collective support to the SDGs. And this review would be based on light annual reporting, focusing on system-wide SDG results. This should form part of the existing reporting requirements, and critically, it would be complemented by independent assessments and evaluations of system-wide results and performance. To increase transparency on system-wide results, the report states that capacities for independent evaluation of system-wide activities need to be created, and so that it complements agent-specific initiatives. In terms of the side event, once again, thank you to UNICEF for hosting the event. Thank you to all of you for your responding to the invitation. Clearly, this indicates the great interest and helps us to move ahead in extremely important work. I have pleasure now to hand over to the chair of the United Nations Evaluation Group and also the moderator of the panel, Suzanne Friou, who is the director of the Internal Oversight Services in UNESCO, and also to welcome her to New York to lead the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Indran, for this key introduction to this event, and also for updating us on what's happening in the UN right now regarding reform. Very much needed if the UN wants to play its support role to the 2030 agenda. I wanted to thank all of you for coming. I'm quite impressed with the numbers here. Usually these events are side events, so they sometimes can be sidelined. So I don't think this is the case here, which really shows the interest in evaluation as a mechanism for Agenda 2030. So welcome to the session, and I hope we will have a fruitful hour and a half or 2 hours with the esteemed panel here. Now, it's a timely discussion. We are in the middle of the HLPF, and the HLPF will bring us up to speed on what's happening on progress for the SDGs. 6 of the SDGs will be discussed, and the topic of this HLPF is eradicating poverty and promoting prosperity in a changing world. Now, this is year 2, and as Indran has mentioned, we have double of the number of countries presenting this year. So this is an achievement, and it is something that is progress, and we have a long road ahead of us. So we would like to take stock and see what is really happening on progress, and how are we measuring progress, and what role can evaluation play in this. Now, clearly, this speaks to the role, the central role of national ownership, accountability, and international credibility. It is the governments that have the primary responsibility for review at the national, regional, and global levels in relation to progress made, and this is very much enshrined in the 2030 agenda. Now, last year was a very good start. Discussions were not just about the national volunteer reports, but it really presented a forum for discussing political, developmental, and social challenges, but also how to involve others like civil society into the 2030 agenda. So really a very good start, and we look forward to this HLPF setting the milestone even further. Now, why are we focusing on evaluation? Well, obviously for one reason, we are the UN Evaluation Group, and we're promoting system-wide accountability and learning. We are a network, and Indran has very much explained what UNEG is all about. But evaluation is a key learning and accountability tool which must build on solid national M&E and data collection. It must allow us to gauge progress, to measure achievements, but also challenges, and help us improve in achieving the SDGs. We must look for unexpected and unintended results as well, and we must ensure that no one is left behind. So a lot of challenging questions for the evaluators. But the real value is to improve learning and to improve the way we plan, the way we implement, and the way we achieve. We need to use evaluation towards more strategic planning and adaptive management. Evaluation is a dynamic and ongoing process, so we are moving alongside the implementation of the SDGs. Now, we have a panel here today, which is a very experienced panel. We have 4 national key actors that are involved in their countries on developing M&E systems and reporting systems for the SDGs, and they will speak to the experiences or the plans they have in their countries. And we have a 5th panelist who will provide us the international perspective from the evaluation community, how the international evaluation community can better support the achievement of the SDGs and the evaluation of them. Now let me move to the first panelist, Ambassador Michael Gerber from Switzerland. Ambassador, you are the Special Envoy for Global Sustainable Development in Switzerland, and you are also lead negotiator for the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. And you have a long esteemed career with your foreign affairs in Switzerland. Your country has been one of the first countries to provide a voluntary report. Can you tell us more how Switzerland intends to better leverage existing evaluation functions to study results on SDGs, and how Switzerland, with its strong national evaluation capacity, really can bring that to also to the international scene? And also how you would envisage seeing other partnerships involved in this endeavor. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to the organizers. It's a great initiative. I appreciate it very much to bring up this important topic here at this time to the HLPF evaluation, one of the key issues actually in the follow-up of the 2030 agenda. So I'm very glad to be here. Thank you so much. Well, for Switzerland, evaluation is an absolute must, like a conditio sine qua non, we could say. Why? I mean, it's clear it is very important per se as such, because, I mean, what could we do without information about the effects of our action? So it's clear. But it's a complementary instrument to all other instruments involved in the whole project cycle management, or the cycle of implementing project programs, strategies, etc., together with other follow-up instruments. And third, it has a high potential, and that's a proven thing that we learn, or we should learn from evaluations, and improve effective governance in the end. Now, with regard to the 2030 agenda, evaluations can support societies in following up on the whole sustainable development activities that exist throughout societies, civil society you mentioned before, but also in politics, parliamentarians, private sector, science, research actors, etc., etc. So they're all involved, and they count on evaluation that is being done and conducted. And it should, to be in line with the 2030 agenda, orient itself along criteria and principles that are enshrined in the agenda, so equity, gender equality, social justice, but also principles, shared principles like partnership, innovation, human rights, etc. So sustainable development partners have a specific role in promoting assessments with a no one left behind lens. We heard that right before. Switzerland can build on existing structures, that's for the one side, and then we have to adapt the structures, and we have to create new processes, etc., in order to follow up on the 2030 agenda and the achievements. First of all, there is a structure in place. Every federal office in the Swiss federal administration has an evaluation function, and we have evaluation policies. So these policies or strategies, etc., are evaluated on a regular basis. Second, these evaluation functions also form an interministerial network that enables exchange of good practices, of joint learning, and the coordination in the case of intersectorial policies, which are increasingly happening. Third point, we have a country-wide evaluation association, also allowing subnational government entities like cantons in Switzerland, but also civil society or universities to take part in the exchange with evaluation officers of federal offices. And this multi-stakeholder association is also responsible for setting standards with regard to policy evaluation. And fourth, many SDGs and targets are actually in the responsibility, of course, of subnational government structures, cantons, communes in our case. And their evaluation capacities are thus crucially important for the evaluation of the 2030 Agenda. So these are all established structures which we can build on. Now, for the domestic implementation of the 2030 Agenda, we have to improve this structure and the system, of course. There is already an indicator system in place that we have been working with for quite a while on sustainable development with about 60 indicators. This system is now updated and aligned with the SDGs. I think at the moment we have approximately 95 indicators in place to really measure what we do in regard to the SDGs. There is an interministerial working group that has launched broad baseline assessment and a gap analysis throughout the Swiss government structure, and with respect to all 169 SDG targets. So for each target, we identified the offices in charge or responsible to follow up on a specific target, and we found out that there is no single target in this framework that only is in the responsibility of one office. There's always at least 2 or 3 that are in charge. So this has become a huge exercise, actually, to conduct this baseline assessment involving more than 50 or almost 50 federal offices. And we have included all existing policies and strategies in place at the federal level, at least. It also considers subnational entities, at cantonal level, and contributions of non-state actors. So now that we conducted it, it is open for comments from the public, and civil society is very engaged in reporting or commenting on what we found at the federal level and on the gaps that we identified. And this is now the basis or the foundation for the Swiss government to decide on next steps in order to implement the 2030 Agenda until 2030. And this is the foundation for a monitoring and evaluation system that we are establishing with this exercise, because it will be possible to follow up on 169 targets in the future until 2030, and we intend to report every 4th year to the high-level political forum, so a 4-year cycle. We will present a voluntary national review next year, 2018, again, because we did it last year already, but we were only able to show initial steps that we take. We couldn't really report on results. So next year we will be able to at least show this system and how we follow up and evaluate the effects of our activities in this regard. And then in the middle of this cycle, of this 4-year cycle, we always work on the Swiss Sustainable Development Strategy, and it is adopted by the government, and in line with the SDGs, sets targets and priorities or a focus of the following 4 years. And this will be presented in the HLPF 2 years later. So this assessment actually complements the monitoring by many means of statistical indicators that we have already, but it is fully tailored to the 169 SDG targets now. And it is a complementary instrument because it also takes into account interlinkages, synergies, and trade-offs among the targets, which is actually not the case usually if we follow up in sectoral fields of action. Now, at an international level, if you allow, I would also just address this question that you also put forward. I think the most pressing issue, and it was already mentioned, is capacity. In many countries, lacking capacity. We have to address these limitations of national, regional, and global capacity in a threefold way by facilitating a strong enabling environment, I think, everywhere, at every level, foster development of institutional capacities, and we have to invest more into individual capacities for evaluations. There are many requirements for this to make it happen. First of all, it is important that countries are in the driver's seat. That's what we believe. The joint action is needed, but in the end, it is a country endeavor. They have to be in the driver's seat. Bilateral donors, UN agencies, civil society, national stakeholders, etc., they have a complementary and supportive role, especially in developing countries. They need this support, that is clear. But country-led evaluations should become the standard of the future. That's what we are really convinced of. In order to see more country-led evaluations, we need joint investment into national capacities, institutional and individual capacities, and in the enabling environment, as I mentioned before, and including evaluation policies, systems, and resource allocation for evaluations. Then data and statistics are prerequisites to install a regular evaluation process. I think that's clear. And therefore, investments in statistical capacities at all levels, global, regional, national, are needed. This is also stipulated in the Cape Town Global Action Plan for Sustainable Development Data, for example, or the recently adopted resolution work of the UN Statistical Commission pertaining to the 2030 Agenda. Furthermore, the use of evaluation results cannot be stressed enough. Countries need policy-making processes and structures that allow for evidence-based adaptations. So joint learning among different stakeholders and between sectors needs to culminate in adapted, equity-oriented policy and programs. With Switzerland's core contributions to multilateral organizations, we support actually national evaluation capacity development, which is done by many multilateral organizations. We also support Paris 21 in order to increase capacities or build capacities in developing countries, so with this specific focus. And in general, with Switzerland's international cooperation, we encourage and foster various empowerment and capacity building efforts. For example, through the EVAL partners, a collaborative approach of interlinking governments, parliamentarians, civil society, evaluation professionals, and the private sector. I will leave it there, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gerber. A really rich introduction, but also showing that how a country like Switzerland, with existing capacities, still has to put together a very elaborate plan and efforts to make it happen. So I do believe we can learn from Switzerland, but we would also like to see how it evolves over time. So hopefully in the coming years when we come back here, we can hear more from you on this. Now let me move to our second panelist, Ambassador Elisaya. Your Excellency, you have been your country's ambassador to the UN since 2003, so a very long experience following your career with your Ministry of Foreign Affairs in your country. Now, Samoa was also among the first countries, like Switzerland, to present a voluntary national review. I would like to ask you to tell us what you have learned from this early presentation and how you are now going about setting up a national measurement and evaluation system, maybe not in line with Switzerland, but what is the Samoan variety of a national measurement system? And if you could tell us more about it. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow panelists, colleagues and friends. I'll have to confess that I'm not an expert on evaluation. As ambassador, my role is to advocate for the challenges and also the opportunities for my country. So that is how I justify my being here. As a university student, one of the most popular songs at the time was called Beg, Steal, or Borrow. I'm a product and also a great believer in the saying that we all learn from borrowed knowledge. So much so that for me, I always challenge my staff and even Samoan officials, try and borrow, if you need to, beg, or even steal somebody else's idea. Importantly, adapt it, modify it, and also Samoanize it. And when that happens, you basically put a stamp, made in Samoa. But I think this is an excellent opportunity to learn and also to share experiences. And I think the point has been made that Samoa was amongst the 22 countries that presented their VNR last year. I think the main observation we drew from last year is that there was little awareness of what evaluation is and how it can be used to support the achievement of the 2030 agenda. Now, my discussion points are drawn from our country's experience following the OECD evaluation of effective development cooperation, which led to our government seriously considering the drafting of an evaluation policy and the institutional setup process that need to be in place for such a national task. But let me be frank and say up front that evaluation is a capacity that Samoa requires significant support for, as there is huge capacity gap in the country. Having such capacity is particularly important since the 2030 agenda puts follow-up and review process at the heart of national efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It emphasized that follow-up and review will be informed by country-led evaluations and high-quality data that are accessible, timely, and reliable. Effective evaluation goes beyond measurement and provides a way to explain data trends and investigates whether progress is equitable, sustainable, and relevant. Our current focus has been on how to measure progress using indicators and statistics. This is the situation at country and also at regional level. Hence, for the Pacific region, and to a large extent Samoa, a lot of emphasis is getting consensus on the indicators to be used, the design of roadmaps for implementation, and focusing on processes of measurement. The important step which requires further attention is considering how effective evaluation will play a vital role in the implementation of the SDG. Simply put, it means using critical thinking, asking questions, analyzing arguments, and assessing claims. This is a process that Samoa endorses, but requires support in building evaluation capacity. There is awareness of the importance of considering whether progress is equitable, relevant, and sustainable, and that they are key considerations to be taken into account for effective evaluation, such as measurement is not enough, evaluation addresses the complexity of the SDGs and their achievement, evaluative thinking is indispensable for informed choice, a national evaluation policy is essential, evaluation builds evidence for claims, and capacity building is crucial, particularly for developing countries that have special needs, such as small island developing states. Some of the challenges Samoa faces in developing evaluation capacities include the development of a national evaluation policy, setting up the institutional processes involved, securing adequate evaluation capabilities, and engaging with partners. Maintaining the stakeholder involvement in follow-up and review process will help governments select the most relevant indicators, inform decision-making, and encourage ownership of the development agenda. This is a normal practice in Samoa situation and is the basis of the localization of indicators process that is ongoing work. Samoa is yet to finalize an evaluation agenda. However, it is aware that this must be based on grounding evaluation on a practice that matches the interconnectedness nature of the SDGs. So it is important to think beyond single policies, programs and projects, forces that can influence success or failure, having a nuanced idea of success, recognizing the importance of culture, and adopting evaluative thinking. In order to fully reflect on the importance of evaluation, compared to when we presented our first national voluntary report last year, we are focusing on, one, getting the support and buy-in from all stakeholders that evaluation is useful and needed, and that national evaluation policies for the 2030 agenda should be designed. Secondly, understanding the limits of macro indicators with regard to assessing the specific contributions of policies designed to help reach the SDGs. Thirdly, understanding evaluation's role as an essential complement to indicators when judging the effects of policies and attributing these to implemented measures. Fourth, voluntary national review should complement the focus on quantitative indicators with more qualitative methodologies. This is an opportunity to include different data sources and tools for analyzing and reporting progress. Organizing evaluation process from now to 2030 through VNRs and their 2030 Agenda National Action Plans using a 4-year pattern that fits the HLPF's thematic cycle and focusing on 3 main aspects, namely assessing causes and effects in complex and interdependent systems by looking at what changed, for whom, how, and why, and paying attention to vulnerable populations and environments, and assessing the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders through co-responsibility lens. Finally, I just want to say that like everything in life, there is always a price. Evaluation is important, but it also means it comes with costs, and I've already alluded to the fact that capacity building is one of those, and I think it's also important for people to believe in it, so that you're not just doing something for the sake of doing it, but you are doing it because it has added value to you, so you own the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Elisea. Let me move on to our next panelist, Mrs. Heidi Berner Herrera. Mrs. Herrera, you are currently the Vice Minister for Social Evaluation at the Ministry of Social Development in Chile, and also the Technical Secretary for the National Council for the Implementation of Agenda 2030. So you're therefore directly involved in your country's evaluation agenda and setting out the plans for how to measure the SDGs. Chile also is one of the countries this year for the first time presenting its voluntary national review, and we very much look forward to hearing what Chile is presenting in the coming weeks. Now, I understand that your ministry, based on existing legislation, already had a very comprehensive evaluation system in place. We would like to maybe hear from you how this existing program is going to be adjusted to fit into the challenges, as mentioned by the other 2 panelists, of complementing, pursuing Agenda 2030. So over to you.
Many thanks for the UN evaluation group for inviting me to share our institutional challenge and our experience in order to accomplish what the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals is really a challenge for Chile, and we are really committed to implement the agenda, but especially taking into account the 3 dimensions of the sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. And because we believe the agenda must be implemented in an integral, indivisible, and non-hierarchizable way. And that is why our president created a national council for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, and also we are using the current measurement and evaluation system to follow up the different objectives. The national institutionality made, as the other panelists already said, we have an implementation that is which president is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but is composed by the Ministry of Economics, the Ministry of Social Development, and the Ministry of Environment. And these are 3 ministers that are in their term of reference is the coordination among different sectors. And we, as the Ministry of Social Development, are the technical secretariat, and we have the technical support of the National Institute of Statistics in all the matter of measuring indicators. We also have put in place 3 different commissions: Economic Commission, a Social Commission, and Environmental Commission, which is not just relied on a public sector, it's also have invited different civil society, private sector, academia, to join the different commissions we have been discussing already, each one of the 17 SDGs, and especially putting in place not only a baseline, but also to interact and let people know what are the different policies in place that will help to accomplish the different objectives, but also all the policies that come from the private sector and the civil society. We believe, as I said at the beginning, that the implementation of the 2030 agenda must be integrated. So the way that we have been working is to put together different objectives of the 17 according to our challenges. The first one is achieving sustainable and inclusive economic and social development. We want to put the place in that. We believe we have been very successful in growing, but our way of growing must be different because we are a country with a lot of we still have a lot of desigualdad, inequalities, and so that is why in this big objective we have many SDGs coming in that way. Then we put as a second point the reducing poverty and inequality, and of course there are many SDGs related to that. Facing climate change, protecting biological and natural resources diversity, and promoting innovation is our third main goal as a more broader way, and strengthening institution and democracy. We believe that without strengthening our institution and democracy, it's not possible to accomplish the rest of the different goals that we have already seen. In terms of evaluation, in January of 2015, the government of Chile have put in place 2 ways of measuring poverty. And we believe this is very important because we updated our monetary way of measuring poverty, which was the same as when we recovered democracy in 1990, and now we have updated to the actual patterns of consume patterns, but we also have put in place a multidimensional poverty measure, which at the beginning in 2015, we really took care of 4 welfare dimensions: education, health, labor, and social security, and housing. But we also believe that poverty need to do and is related to the environment where the households are located, and the network and that the household has available. So in 2006, we also include with housing the environment, and there we are also measuring things like environmental contamination and other things that are close to household, and network and social cohesions. So very shortly, what we have been talking in all the different commissions is the necessity for the SDG and the 2030 agenda to also rely on the pertinence of each country. Because normally we discuss, about the $1.9 per day, and this is something that if you start talking within our country, no one will really take this. They will say, okay, but I don't believe you, in Chile there is no poverty. So that is why we have been discussing very much in focus in the national measuring, especially in the multidimensional poverty measure. Just to show that we have been very successful in reducing it, but it still have a big problem because in a multidimensional poverty measure, we have only 4.5% that households that are both poor by monetary measure and poor and the multidimensional measure. And I think that is something important that we need to look when we evaluate, but also when we design policies. Because normally in our middle income countries, we are much more into policies that have to do with transferring money. But the main point here is that it's not enough, probably you all know already that, but because it's a different type of policy that you need to do when you have monetary poverty than when you have a multidimensional poverty and you have 16.4% of the household that where deprivation doesn't have to do with necessary with money. So it has to do with access to education, access to a health system, a house that is close to a place where I can move easily to get a health attention or to go to school or even to take a public transportation. And this is also why we believe that the agenda must be, in a way, to look at it in a very comprehensive way and integrated. Because in Chile, for example, 31% of the deprivation has to do with labor and social security. But not because the people that don't have a job, it's because that type of job is not a quality job. So, and just is one of the examples. So what we do with evaluation, of course, we measure poverty, and with this, we have these two this new way of measuring, but also we are using our monitoring and evaluation system for social programs that we are by law, we need to evaluate all the new and significantly resigned social programs, and we also need to monitor the management and implementation of social program being already being executed by the public services, which is most of the programs, you know. Most of the budget have to already allocate, and we need to try to make the changes enough to have a better program and to focus on their results. And something that already said the ambassador of Samoa is the importance of having evaluation that is part of the decision-making process. In the case of Chile, we are part of the decision-making process because we are really close to the budget direction, where, you know, every year, if you don't have money, you don't exist. So you part of every year you need to, you know, negotiate your budget, and all the information that we produce is part of that decision-making process. Well, this is really, we have more than 400 programs being monitoring, and all the new programs pass for this system. So we have an ex-ante evaluation, a monitoring, and ex-post evaluation, which is at the Ministry of Finance. But mainly what type of change which have made in this existing system of evaluation, it has to do on when we evaluate the relevance, whether a program adjusts to the ministerial policies or the government priority, including the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. This is part of our process. So every program that a new program that want to be created, or a one that is asking for reformulation in the budget process, will pass for this review, and we are now focusing also in the agenda, and especially because we now have a baseline and a diagnosis of where are the gaps. In what type of SDGs we don't have a policy in place, so we need to do something about it. But we also evaluate the investment project, because something very important in our countries, of course, are some gaps that we have in investment in water, or in education and in health system and everything. I'm talking about hospitals and stuff like that. So what we have done also, because we are in charge of our system that evaluate every project, we do a project appraisal of all projects that use public money. What we are doing it is especially to put into place the two things. One, the application of the carbon social price in the social evaluation of the project in order to contribute to the reduction of carbon emissions in Chile. That has to do also with the SDG and the Sendai framework. And second, we complement the social evaluation of project with a disaster risk assessment to contribute to the reduction of losses in public infrastructure to the natural disaster and formulate projects with a high resilience infrastructure. This is very important in Chile, especially because in the past years we have a lot of, we have earthquake, we have volcanoes, so I guess you already sometimes heard in the news all that challenge. So I think it's very important to have prevention and to be part of ex-ante evaluation, the disaster risk assessment. That's it. I will end here, and all the information is in our webpage. Many thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Berna Herrera, for a very interesting presentation that also links up the Sustainable Development Agenda, of course, with disaster risk reduction and making sure that this is reflected in all of the policies. Let me now move on to our next panelist, and that is, now I'm losing my notes, Dr. Burton Manguni. Dr. Manguni, you are the Deputy Statistician General for Economic and Social Statistics of Botswana, with a vast experience as an academic and higher education manager. Now, you're also currently a member of the UN SDG International Agency Expert Group, so a very important function in developing the indicators. And we've heard a lot about indicators already by the various panelists and the need to contextualize them. Now, Dr. Manguni, your country is now presenting its first voluntary national report next week at this HLPF, and we look very much forward to hearing more on that. As an expert on statistics, can you tell us more how Botswana has developed its own national measurement and evaluation system, and where do you see the key challenges, in particular when it comes to ICT and big data? Over to you, Dr. Manguni.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. It has been said that monitoring and evaluation and data and statistics are twins. And this is being said because monitoring and evaluation cannot happen without data and statistics. And those of us involved in data and compilation and analysis of statistics sometimes expected to show cause why we should not be charged with waste of resources and hanged if indeed the statistics and data are not used for monitoring and evaluation and informed decision making. Yes, Chairperson. We in Botswana do have a national measurement and evaluation system whose components essentially were approved this year at the highest levels. The entity that was responsible for developing this system sits at the highest office in the country, that is the office of the President. And that office is called the National Strategy Office. And of course, the measurement and evaluation system, there's a policy on that which speaks to the various structures associated with that policy, with the system. And then, of course, there's the infrastructure of the system that is articulated as well. While this strategy office is located within the office of the President and is responsible really for the coordination and implementation of this strategy, the actual evaluation, to the extent possible, is to be done by independent entities. Now, the vision for the country is called Vision 2036, which started in 2016. That vision provides for a measurement and evaluation and actually accountability system. In the context of that vision, there should be a measurement and evaluation at least every 5 years. And this is to inform the planning for the next plan. The country has been operating for quite some time now on a system of national development plans, And at the moment, we are on National Development Plan 11, which kicked off this year. And so the intent is that, every cycle there would be a rigorous evaluation of everything from strategies, programs, and so on, so that as you go forward, there is a correction, an improvement, or abandonment of perhaps what was being done before that did not function. As I indicated, the national development plans are really critical in terms of the entire economic and social development of the country. As I indicated, we currently are on the National Development Plan 11, and that National Development Plan has a performance framework. Now, this performance framework is links to the vision, which is the Vision 2063, 2036. 63 is the Africa one. Botswana one is 36. And so we have the pillars. There are 4 pillars. These pillars are the things that must be done to take us to what needs to be achieved. And then there also is a link to their thematic areas in terms of the National Development Plan. These, for example, are sustainable economic development, human and social development, sustainable environment, governance, peace, and security. These are the thematic areas of the development plan. And then there are indicators to all of these areas and targets over the years as to where these indicators should be sitting at. And linked to all these indicators and targets are strategies, projects, programs, and who the various entities that are responsible for those are, so that as the performance is being looked at, there has to be an evaluation of these related projects. Now, you did ask the question regarding the ICT and big data. Fortunately, we have tremendous progress has been made in the area of connectivity and ICT, and one sees a lot of opportunities. Already some are being taken advantage of. Increasingly, our ministries and so on have management information systems to manage and capture administrative data. Obviously, if you have administrative data, then we are in a position to provide the necessary data for evaluation and monitoring. And we see from a Statistics Botswana point of view, we see using ICT for reporting in terms of the indicators, using various platforms that will create some which already exist in that regard. So there is that opportunity. Big data does indeed exist in the country, like everywhere else. The banks, the phone companies, the supermarkets generate this data, and we and even the players in the private sector are looking to use this big data. There are challenges around the use of big data and ICT. The challenge is really around the big data, is getting around to making sure that you assure those who are collecting this data, like the banks, the phone companies, about privacy issues. And so that is being worked on. And for example, there is work, let me just say, there is work that is ongoing so that there should be access, at least by the National Statistical Organization, to some of this data, which would then be used for monitoring and evaluation. Because if you have this data, as you don't know, you don't have to do surveys. And if you don't do surveys are expensive, so there's a benefit to that. The other challenge, of course, is the WannaCries of the world. They seem to leave no one behind. So this is a big challenge even for us. The other one that I would touch on in terms of a challenge, of course, is that there would be need for increased human resource development to take advantages of this, particularly making the skills available at the local levels. Let me stop there, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mnguni. So on to the last panelist, last but not least, Stefano De Rico. You are the M&E and Learning Lead at the IIED. You're also involved in a number of international evaluation networks, so you are a bona fide international evaluation advocate, and also very much involved in the Eval SDGs. That is a network of evaluators promoting evaluation of the SDGs. So welcome to this panel. Now, you have co-authored a number of evaluation briefs on effective evaluation of SDGs. You have also lamented on the fact that the first voluntary national reports didn't seem to really reflect evaluative evidence. Can you tell us more about that? And can you tell us if you see a silver lining on the horizon? Now, having heard to a number of the panelists, many plans are in place, but do you see a change? Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So, first of all, I would like to say that I'm here representing the Eval SDGs, which is an international network of professionals in evaluation, and we would like to thank the organizer, UNDP, UNICEF, and UNEG. So, yes, my intervention is really based on a first series of papers and research around evaluation and how evaluation can be used for the SDGs and to implement the SDGs. And first of all, I would like to say that the voluntary national review process could sound as a very technical and bureaucratic topic, but these are actually real-world issues, as we have heard today. In fact, the issue at stake is how to embed the SDGs into real-world processes of development at national and subnational level. And I think we have heard quite very good examples today on different ways to do that. And we need to do that to reach the tipping point that we desperately need to face the big challenges of our time. So follow-up review processes do not concern only the national report made by each country to the HLPF every 4 years. In fact, Agenda 2030 makes it very clear that the country report to the HLPF is only one piece of the jigsaw, a very important one, but still one. The real change will happen only when reviews, assessment, and evaluations will be used locally to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. Eventually, this means understanding national politics as much as fueling movements for social and environmental action. It means dealing with hard-to-predict, intricate, and often volatile interactions between different interests and drivers. Ultimately, for evaluators, this means brokering the values, the views, and the needs of different stakeholders, while new knowledge is generated. So in doing this, evaluators have a responsibility to challenge monopolies of any kind, of problem definition, of issue formulation, of data control, of information utilization. So for example, the interaction of the SDGs often implies trade-offs and clashes between the goals, such as the clashes between conservation policies and economic growth. Evaluators need to mediate these different interests in the process of value definition. So what does that mean for evaluation in the review and follow-up processes of the SDGs? How do we do it? As evaluators, we can serve Agenda 2030 by facilitating the cogeneration of judgments of value about what works, for whom, under what conditions, as our colleague from Samoa was saying. These judgments must be based on varied sources of rigorous evidence, but equally, they must be based on processes that enable different stakeholders to interpret data and unpack the complexity of the real world. And I think we've heard some very good processes from from Chile today. Agenda 2030 is a massive step forward because it recognizes the interrelationships between human economic development and the environment. However, in its complexity, it can become a huge burden for national governments. So we need to find ways to digest the agenda by developing simple messages around its key principles: country ownership, universality, sustainability, partnership, and no one left behind. And so this is what I will try to do now in presenting the findings of our review. So in terms of country ownership, 22 countries have put themselves forward to report to the HLPF last year, and 44 will be reporting next week. We have analyzed the first 22 reports, and we have found that 16 out of those 22 countries have already established a governance system for M&E at president, prime minister, or at ministry level. In 8 countries, interministerial agencies coordinate exchanges between ministries. And again, here I'm speaking about last year, so we haven't done the analysis of the report submitted this year. But these are remarkable efforts and the tangible signs of how a few nations are actually taking the lead to make this happen. In terms of universality, it struck us that many states, including Australia, Canada, Russia, South Africa, the UK, and the US, have not yet announced any plans for reporting of the VNRs. This clashes loudly with the universality principles of the agenda. Also, it is interesting to note how some developed countries see Agenda 2030 mostly as related to the overseas development assistance and not to their national domestic achievements. For example, a recent report of a parliamentary committee in the UK has encouraged the UK government to shift its approach to the SDGs because it was mostly concerned with ODA. Likewise, despite Finland has already put in place an impressive system to implement the SDGs, evaluation is only mentioned in their report as a tool to assess partnership and ODA. In terms of sustainability, very few of the reporting countries are considering developing a specific M&E system for the SDGs. In fact, many are relying on systems already put in place for the MDGs, which could be a very good thing and a practical approach. However, we will have 3 situations ahead. Countries that will be adopting the framework of the MDGs, countries with advanced frameworks on sustainable development, and countries that must start from scratch. On the one hand, the MDGs could become the biggest enemy of the SDGs if the new frameworks will simply mirror the previous one, without considering the interactions between social, economic, and environmental dimensions. On the other hand, countries that must build new frameworks have a big task ahead, and we have heard how a developed country like Switzerland is actually finding it difficult to put this in place. So challenges and solutions are, of course, context-specific, but the key message is global. Sustainability is about humans as much as environments. The two go hands in hands. So in terms of partnership, many of the 22 countries have implemented special committees to consult, guide, or oversee their SDG national processes. Now, these institutions often include civil society organizations and people from the private sector. Some countries are promoting the engagement of civil society in assessing the gaps of their previous reporting systems. Others are engaging sustainability experts. All of these are very good evaluative practices that should be encouraged. Finally, in terms of no one left behind, many countries noted that they lack data and need to improve their statistical reporting system if they are to use M&E to implement the 2030 agenda. Now, we all know that the more we try to disaggregate data, the more these become unreliable. So this challenge will heavily affect our ability to understand who has been left behind. The answer to understand progresses on equity and equality cannot come only from numbers and survey data. We need to have processes, again, to analyze different types of information, quantitative, qualitative, but also maps and other types of data. We need processes to synthesize all this data into value judgments, and that is an evaluation job. Finally, one word about evaluation and the use of evaluation in the first set of reviews. Our paper states clearly that most of the reviews lack detail about how evaluation could be used to inform the reporting processes. To understand both what is changing and the effectiveness of different approaches, policies, and interventions, we need good statistics, we need good politics, and also we need good evaluation. These elements are all necessary, but alone insufficient components to put together all the pieces of the jigsaw and realize the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, work in progress. I think a very good summary of the reports last year, and I look forward to seeing the analysis for this year, because I do think we're on a journey. And as we can hear from the panel, everyone is doing something. Some countries are ahead, and there's a real opportunity, of course, to learn from each other. Now, let me move on to the open part. We'd like to hear from you. If you have any comments, any questions to the panel, if you do, please raise your hand, and we will we'll take the questions as they come in, I would say, 3 to 4 at a time. So who would like to start? Okay, let me maybe then, there's a hand up there, so can you please identify yourself and let us...
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pamela Ritt, and I'm with the UNICEF Evaluation Office here. And I really appreciated the update on the status of national reviews towards the SDG achievement, and in particular, the comment about the need to build the capacity of subnational actors in the process. And I was wondering if there are any examples from the panelists on effective ways of doing that. And in particular, if there's been any discussions, especially when involving civil society organizations, as to whether or not beneficiaries themselves, such as adolescents, women, children, are going to be involved in some way in the evaluation process, either as participants or as co-leaders of evaluation, if you envision that in your work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Over there to Inga. We have a question down there.
Hi, good afternoon. So thank you very much for very insightful presentations. I have a question, kind of more broad question. So it seems that in the 20 agenda, there are so many competing priorities. So what would be your advice? So how we can break through this noise to evaluate for evaluation efforts, to advocate for evaluation efforts kind of more broadly? So what would be, your steps? So what can we do, to make sure that evaluation actually is taken into account in these reviews as evaluation community, and maybe also, as people who are deciding how programs are evaluated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything more? Yes, please, over there. And can you please introduce yourself?
Many thanks for the good presentations. I'm Hanna Janicek from the German Development Institute. What always comes to my mind when thinking about evaluation, I think it's quite a complex world, speaking already about all the interlinkages within the SDG agenda, given the fact that we also have the Paris Agreement, which puts another, let's say, bundle of actions on national level implementation. We have these two large frameworks where we have to implement actions. I wonder if you can maybe elaborate a bit if there's any experience how data collection and planning of implementation or planning processes can go hand in hand to sort of maybe relieve the burden that is put on national levels to implement these two large agendas. Or if that is more something like visual thinking.
Thank you. One more, and then we'll do the first round of responses.
Hi, my name is Fikret from Ministry of Development Turkey, which is the main coordinator regarding SDGs in our country. My question is to the representative of Chile. I wonder whether the National Council for Sustainable Development has a role in the evaluation of social program or investment system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let us start with his last question that is specifically addressed to Chile. Please.
I'm sorry, the question was if the national institution has the council, no, with the ministers. Yeah. Okay. As I show you in the figure, we, as a Minister of Social Development, are part of the council, and we are in charge of I will say three main things that have to do with the evaluation system. And in our law, we are mandated to evaluate all social programs. We have the mandate also to evaluate all the investment project, and we are in charge with the National Statistic Office to provide data for the measurement of poverty. So that means that we are at the same time designing policy in some way, but because we are part of a minister committee, but we are always looking at the evaluation process and all the results. So in fact, we are the link that give the information to the ministers and to all the institutionality about the gaps that we see, and also the programs that are not having good results, or the investment projects that sometimes are not cost effectiveness or that they are not cost benefits in the cost benefits analysis. So it's really a matter of being there at the right time, because I think there are many places where they do a lot of evaluation, and especially I think there is a trade-off when you believe that the evaluation need to be out, because it's more, sometimes you believe that it's more transparent, or because there is someone else that doesn't it. I'm not saying that is not good. I think we have a good academia, we have many centers that can also do an independent evaluation, but I will say that independent, that doesn't mean that it's an external evaluation. I believe that in Chile we have a system where we are very independent as a public servants in doing our evaluation, which is not external, but is much closer to the decision-making process. When you have an external evaluation, of course, you have someone else that is looking very far behind, but sometimes they are very far behind of the decision-making process. So I think, I know that is not the question, but I believe that it's something that we need to talk about it, especially in this type of events, how much external need to be the evaluation. And I think that is related to the first question on what is the role of the civil society. I think they have a role, and it's important that they have their report. In fact, Chile is doing our exam on next Monday, but also we have our civil society that is coming with you call it a parallel report, and I think that is good for democracy. I believe that they need to be part of all the dialogue and diagnosis, but I believe it's much better for democracy to keep, because the agenda is very long, and there will be many governments coming, in our countries. And civil society has an important role in monitoring and evaluating, and I think it's very valuable that they have a parallel report and maybe not be part of the same evaluation that each government has.
Thank you very much. Let me hand the question from UNICEF to Dr. Munguni. It's a question about examples for national capacity building for evaluation. Can you give us some examples for what is happening in Botswana and what are the needs?
Well, certainly, evaluation, national evaluation, even at the national level, is quite a challenge. And I think this work has been done to some extent at the national level. At the local level, there would be challenges in terms of the human resource that is available. In our country, we have local authorities in terms of what we call districts, and often they are not, for a variety of reasons, able to compete successfully in terms of recruiting the kind of staff that is required to do some of this work. But increasingly, the national office certainly is engaging and supporting, some of the work that goes on at these levels in terms of the programs that are administered at that level. But I think there are still challenges. I don't have really good examples at this time that I can give in that regard.
Thank you, Dr. Manguni. Any other one of the panelists wants to contribute to this question? No, so let us move to the next one from UN Women. This is about advocacy for evaluation, and I thought maybe Mr. Denrika would like to have a go at this one.
Yes, I think advocacy for evaluation I think it is important at the national level. It depends how we see advocacy. I think it is important that we, as evaluators, engage in voluntary national review processes. We try to understand what are the challenges of governments, the political economy of these processes, and I think we have to be proactive. So if that is advocacy, then I think yes, we need to advocate for greater evaluation. If we just bang on saying, well, we need to do more evaluation, and we try to to put the governments on the spot, I don't think it's going to work.
Thank you. Anyone to add to this? Yes, Dr. Manguni?
Not specifically on this one. It was the question of the burden of reporting that I wanted to respond to. Just to say that, indeed, really, in terms of the frameworks that are there, the SDG framework and the climate change framework, this is a very, very heavy burden. Just on the monitoring side, I mean, the SDGs, there are 230 indicators. For us in Africa, there is at least 200, there is some commonality, 200 indicators for the Agenda 2063, which is the continental one, national one, 32, development plan, 80. So there's quite a lot. But I think the strategy that we are adopting in our own country is to utilize, to the extent possible, the national statistical system that is beyond the National Statistical Organization. So the various sectors, the agriculture sectors, the health sector, and really sort of create capacity in terms of collection and analysis at that level through what is called the National Strategy for the Development of Statistics that we are overseeing. And to the extent possible, really take advantage of technology, so that in terms of reporting, utilize platforms such as the open data platforms and so on. Now, if you look at the evaluation, monitoring and providing data on indicators is a challenge, but evaluation is even more. So that is really a huge burden that will need a strategy. Thank you.
Much. Ambassador Gelber, how does Switzerland deal with a very complex world with major international agreements?
Thank you. Yeah, well, as I tried to elaborate on during in my first remarks, we already have a statistical system in place that is quite detailed, also in the environmental sector, climate. And so now with the SDGs, we have to enlarge it, the whole sustainable development, to counting also on interlinkages, etc. of the SDGs. That's a big challenge. But there you are. I think with SDG 13, we are in the midst of the climate and Paris Agreement action that is out there. And so we have this combination already. So we have to enlarge it, but it's not like a double burden now with these two specific international agreements. I think there are many others, of course, but there are always these interlinkages already given, like biodiversity, the IG targets, which we are measuring already, and now you have targets that rely to them or refer to them. So it is not like a double burden. But if I may, I would also address the first question of UNICEF regarding subnational capacities, which is an important issue in Switzerland. But of course, in developing countries where subnational entities and statistical offices, etc., are weak, it is a big challenge. In our case, we have also established in many cantons these systems on following up on education, etc., wherever their responsibilities are. But in developing countries, I think it's a great issue, and therefore we work through our international cooperation and the budgetary means we have with it to support developing countries in strengthening these capacities, especially at the subnational level. And I mentioned Paris 21 from the OECD, which is an initiative that is focusing on exactly this.
Maybe let me add also a question here, and I'll address this question to Ambassador Eli Lesaya. My colleague Indran, in his welcoming speech, mentioned the fact that the Secretary General is thinking about establishing a system-wide evaluation capacity, quite senior in the UN system, to help us look at system-wide challenges, at the complexity we're facing with these large agendas. Now, that reflects a need for capacity in the UN system, but we're at the same time speaking very much for the need for national capacities and for building capacities for developing policies. From your viewpoint, what can the UN do? What does the UN need to do better in terms of supporting national capacities?
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't say that something that the UN had to do better, because I think there are better charges over that. All I can say is, for instance, and I will relate it, in terms of some of the questions that had been posed. Because for me, whether it's the Paris Agreement, whether it's the 2030 Agenda, whether they are the SDGs, they are all useful global frameworks. At the end of the day, it's how you regionalize them and it's how you localize them. But more importantly, it's how you try and integrate all these frameworks into your own national sustainable strategy, because that's how you can relate to all these agreements that we are parties of. And therein lies the importance for me of evaluation, because at the end of the day, it's how you are able to tell the people, or it's how people are able to say that I'm glad that we are a party to this because it's doing something good. Because it's the foot that wears the shoe that knows best whether the shoe fits or not. It's not the salesperson who will come and say it looks very nice on you, Ambassador, when it's either too tight or too loose, or maybe it fits. So what I'm saying is, it's the people on the ground who will have a better appreciation of whether some of these global frameworks are actually doing something to help improve their lives. I think as small island developing states, sometimes we conveniently say that we don't have the data. I think that's just a convenient excuse, because it's how people, and sometimes you may have the data, but if it's not doing anything to really make a change to people's lives, then I think there is something wrong somewhere. What the UN can do is, I think it's also important to not only just to listen, but to hear what the people have to say, and try and tailor-make some of the approaches. Because too often, it's difficult. I know that there are so complex societies out there, but if you are able to have one small island state, it's probably better than trying to come up and generate solutions which you'll think will help the whole world when it's you are just looking for a common denominator. So I think the challenge is be honest, be frank, but more importantly, get out to the field, talk to the people, and hear what they have to say, and work with them so that they can at least appreciate what you are doing, because we are both sides of the same coin. But our advocacy and your help will really make a change and make people feel and relate. What are all these SDGs have to do with me? Because I think that one important thing about the SDGs is that my own Prime Minister, when we were during the MDGs period, he always said, "When is the prize giving day? When is the prize giving day?" So I said, "What do you mean, Prime Minister?" And he said, "It's important for us because there is a competitiveness inbuilt in some of these goals." Why? Because I compare myself to my neighbor. If neighbor A is on target to meet all the SDGs, how come Samoa isn't? So it's a positive competitiveness. It allows you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. But therein lies the importance of partnerships, because with partnerships, it allows you to take a leap of faith, even if your partner is not in the same room. So UN, they are one of our traditional and more important partners. But I think it's important also to focus just on the modest success, because it's difficult to bring about global changes all at one go. But if you are able to do something well, others will you are able to replicate it, and people will also try to imitate. It comes back to being to borrow, share, and replicate. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Indeed, partnership is all this is about. It's not about the UN. It is really about national ownership, and it is about bringing everyone who can contribute to the table, whether civil society, the evaluation community, the international community. We have run a bit over time, but do we have any urgent questions? Anyone wants to add something? Yes, over there. Matthew, please, from UNICEF.
SDGs are basically a statement of intent, it's a framework to go forward, and evaluations are important to find out whether we progressed and whether it has got. What would actually happen is at the end when the evaluation does come, it's say we are progressing or some of it has been met, and that we already know. What is most important is to currently look at the availability of policies and programs, so that whether it is designed properly and whether the policies are taking into account the SDGs to actually have met those targets by the time they would. Thank you, sir. But I think I'm speaking loud enough. Whether those policies make the sense, and whether we can actually, the ambassador statement, whether there are good examples out there which you can actually copy and put it up. And what Indran was speaking about system-wide evaluation, if we are working together as one, then we should evaluate as one. And if we are working together for the SDGs, then we should do evaluability as one. And therefore, we have to look at system-wide evaluability which suits the purpose, not just about evaluation itself. Thank you.
Thank you. A very useful comment. Anyone else? Last chance? I don't see any. Yes, a final comment. Deborah Rugg, please. Deborah is the former chair of UNEG, one of my predecessors.
Say that. In addition to prior UNEG, I worked in the AIDS prevention for 30 years, over 30 years, in monitoring and evaluation. And what we learned, it's deja vu for me. We were dominated by monitoring. We were dominated by indicators. And while they're necessary and the necessary first step, they're insufficient. And they can take up all the time and all the money and all the attention, this external reporting demand. So what I've seen we need to do is have our leadership at the highest ambassadorial and government levels put a balance into the system that requires and funds the evaluative exercises. Because we know what statistics and indicators can tell us and what they don't tell us. They don't tell us the why and the local. I couldn't agree more than with the statements from the ambassador from Samoa. Evaluation is local. That's where it's really valuable. At the global level, it's going to be a challenge. All this external reporting of indicators is a global burden, and it can take up all our time, money, and attention. We can't let that happen this time. We made that mistake with AIDS for at least 18 years. We made that mistake with the MDGs. Let us not make that mistake with the SDGs. This is an opportunity. But how do we do that? And maybe those of you that operate at the highest levels of power have some insight into that. We need to put a cap. We need to say 1% of our overall budget in this is going for evaluation. And we mean evaluation. We don't mean just collecting more indicators. That's important, necessary first step, but we'll never make the changes we need for the formative new design of interventions that really work if we're not doing local level evaluation at the country level and countries in the driver's seat to decide what those evaluation activities are going to be and have them be funded. So very much look forward to any ideas you might have on that, because that will represent a change.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I think a very good reminder of the importance of putting evaluation at the forefront and understanding why change and why change is happening. And to understand it, we need to understand the local context, the culture, what makes us change and what makes us resist to change. So I do hope that we all walk away here as champions of evaluation, because I think the panel has aptly demonstrated how evaluation can play a role, must play a role in progressing on the SDGs. We've heard from, we have heard some very good lessons. As our Swiss panelist has said, evaluation is a must. Without evaluation, there's no information about the effects of actions. It needs to be complementary to other follow-up instruments. And also, we need it for learning and effective governance. Now, the role of ICT, big data, yes, we need the data, but we need to explain it. So Deborah very well said, the data is one part of the puzzle, but the explanation and really understanding, contextualizing, and using it to improve is the challenge we're all facing. We need to also have national policies for evaluation. So setting budgets is one way of doing it, but really having national policies, setting an evaluation function high up, as some of the countries have done, as Mr. D'Enrico has already said, that is a good example. So let us learn from each other, because there are good examples out there, and it is from those examples we can improve. Now, there are also challenges, and the challenges have been mentioned by the panelists and the audience as well. The complexity in this world, how are we going to deal with all of these issues, and just coming up with the indicator framework at country level and measuring that is the first step, but there's so much more to be done. We've talked about the issue of funding, the issue of capacities. There are limited capacities everywhere. We need to work together. We need to learn from each other, but really also make it happen. So capacity building is a goal for everyone, and I would say countries that have capacities already in place could very well help other countries develop those capacities. The UN itself needs to play a supportive role. There is a GA resolution on building national capacities. We are very much committed to it, but it requires more than just talk. We need to walk the talk, and I think these kind of discussions will hopefully help us start walking a bit into that direction. So a big challenge ahead of us, but as I was saying, we're just starting. Let me close this side event by again thanking UNICEF very much for organizing this side event. We could not have done this without UNICEF. UNICEF is one of the UN Evaluation Group members, and this was a UNEG event, and there's more to come in the future, I hope. And thank you very much to the 5 panelists. Thank you so much.